fortune, such as it is, by predicting macroeconomic changes better than other people. What Buffett and I did was we bought things that were promising, and then sometimes we had a tailwind from the economy and sometimes we had a headwind. And either way, we just kept swimming. That's our system. And after all, that's the system Caltech has too. Caltech just gets up in the morning and keeps swimming, and pretty soon they're eminent. Caltech's not trying to play the game of getting big advantage out of the booms and busts. We're just like Caltech. No, you're trying to get the right answers, but you're not really trying to predict what the economy is going to be like 18 months from now.
Said the other day, the idea that 100% of GDP was some terribly dangerous level for the other day, the idea that 100% of GDP was some terribly dangerous level for doesn't really make a whole lot of sense now, and that used to be kind of accepted wisdom. We've learned that a lot of things we thought before weren't true, but what we haven't learned yet is whether what we're doing now. We've learned that a lot of things we thought before weren't true, but what we haven't learned yet is whether what we're doing now is true. Succeed in a way where you get a decent result no matter what happens, and that's what we try and do at Berkshire Hathaway. We do not think we can make money by making macroeconomic predictions. We do think we can be pretty darn sure we'll get a reasonable result under policies that will not maximize result if we could do that sort of thing.
It's not at all clear whether Larry is right or wrong. And
he's a smart man, though.
He is a smart man.
Yeah.
And it's courageous of him to raising it to. He's practically the only one talking that way, which I admire, by the way.
Yeah, it guarantees he won't get a position in the administration. Guarantees he won't get a position in the administration.
Yes. Well, that's one of the reasons I admire him.
Yeah.
And
you need to be accurate. You need to follow this kind of trend. What do you do?
Well, another good question. But think about your question. Things are rising. The price is above the reference price, but you don't want to sell. Well, why not? And the answer is because you're human. Because you're afraid it's gone from already 50 to 100, but you're afraid that if it goes from 100 to 200 and you sell at 100, you'll feel stupid.
But if you buy a good company,
yes,
maybe you are failing on your valuation side, and the company will continue creating value on the mid-long term as well.
Well, that's true. And by the way, there's nothing wrong. So if you remember what I said about cycle positioning, asset selection, and cycle positioning. So what you're saying, let me back that up and put that on there, if I can. Right there. So these are the two things you can do. So what this gentleman is saying is, maybe you say, I only want to do asset selection. I don't want to do cycle positioning. Because number one, it's hard to get cycle positioning right. And number two, if you do good asset selection and ignore cycle positioning, in the long run, you'll do okay. Nothing wrong with that. That's fine. I commend you for taking that attitude. And that's what we call buy and hold. And a lot of people do buy and hold, and they do okay. So they buy here, then they hold here, and they hold here, and they hold here, and they hold here. And in the long run, you benefit from the uptrend, right? That's okay if you want to do that. The question is, can you do better? I believe that by becoming aggressive here and defensive here and aggressive here and defensive here, you can do a little better. So the question is whether you want to try. There's nothing invalid, incorrect about what you say. The only question is, can you do better? And let me point something out. Number one, it's not easy to add value through working the cycles. And a friend of mine in England wrote a book about investing. It's called Simple But Not Easy. The things we want to do are clear. Doing them is not easy. And I was speaking with my son, who works with our family office, runs the family office, about when I was writing the book. And I said, you know, I've made 6, 7 calls over the years, and I think they've all been about right. And he said to me, Dad, that's right. You made 6 times in 50 years. And of course, you know, he's correct. Once in a while, at the great extremes, 2000, when stocks were way high in the tech bubble, that was a great time to sell. Late 08, early 09, in the global financial crisis after the bankruptcy of Lehman, that was a great time to buy. But there was 8 or 9 years in between when there was nothing clever to do in this regard. So in other words, you don't get opportunities very often, but once a decade or twice a decade, you do get profound opportunities. And the question is whether you will take advantage of them or say, no, I'm a buy and hold guy, which is okay too. There's no right or wrong.
Well, let me start with a qualification. Warren and I have not made our way in life by making successful macroeconomic predictions and betting on our conclusions. Our system is to swim as competently as we can, and sometimes the tide will be with us and sometimes it will be against us. But by and large, we don't much bother with trying to predict the tides because we plan to play the game for a long time. I recommend to all of you exactly the same attitude. It's kind of a snare and a delusion to outguess macroeconomic cycles. Very few people do it successfully, and some of them do it by accident. When the game is that tough, why not adopt the other system of swimming as competently as you can and figuring that over a long life you'll have your share of good tides and bad tides. And so, with that qualification, of course, everybody has some ideas on the economy. But I want you to understand that these ideas do not have the credibility of anybody who's successfully made macroeconomic predictions. In other words, they may not be worth very much. But I will be surprised if employment bounces back with the wonderful speed that it did after previous economic disappointments of the one we've been through. I just see business after business after business, which is rationalized so that it can do creditably in terms of protecting its balance sheet and its earning power while utilizing fewer people. So this is a bad market for easy employment compared to the conditions which have existed most of the time in recent decades. And some of you are going out into a bad market. My attitude toward that is very simple. I think you should all just say, so what? There are good tides and there are bad tides. I have a long way to go. And we know from the example of other people that if you constantly stand well by your own generation and cope with competency and grace with whatever life deals you and just keep doing it, your share of the honors and emoluments of the civilization in due time are very likely to come if you deserve the emoluments. And of course, that's the other advice. The best way to get what you want in life is to deserve what you want. How could it be otherwise? It's not crazy enough so that the world is looking for a lot of undeserving people to reward.
Well, let me ask.
And so you keep plugging. So I wouldn't be discouraged. I told a group this morning about an example of what I call a real bad employment market. My uncle Fred graduated from the Harvard School of Architecture with great distinction. And in the 20s, he had a very successful architectural practice in Omaha where he did churches and little buildings and houses and so forth, and he made $8,000 or $10,000 a year, which was an enormous amount of money to make from creditably performing the architectural profession in the 1920s. When the 30s came, the architectural permits, building permits in Omaha, would sometimes go down to $30,000 per month for the whole city of Omaha, and some of those were furnace repairs. There was exactly zero work for architects, including my distinguished architect, Uncle Fred. He moved to California, and in California, he took drafting work at low rates for a few architects that still had some work. And when it got worse than that, he went to the county of Los Angeles. In the agony of the county, They classified him as a laundryman to save money, but had him do drafting work, which after all was exercising his skill. He didn't think it was beneath him. He coped as best he could. He never complained to anybody. And his pay after deductions, all through 31, 32, 33, 34, 108.08 per month. Now that wasn't as bad as it seems, because he rented a whole house in Glendale for $25 a month. When they created the FHA in 1936, he could take a civil service exam, at which he was first. So for the rest of his life, he was the chief architect for the FHA in Los Angeles, a responsible and interesting and civilization benefiting line of work, and he had a long and happy career doing that. He never got discouraged. He never thought what he had to do was something he should wail about. I never heard him complain about anything. Woe is me. Generally speaking, there are two things I found in my long life one you never do. One is never feel sorry for yourself. If your child is dying of cancer, don't feel sorry for yourself. Never, ever feel sorry for yourself. And the other thing you never want to have is envy. That's the only one of the deadly sins you're never going to have any fun at all. Pick one of the others. And so, but if you go through life just everlastingly plugging away at these bad times, you know, Kipling has gone totally out of vogue because it's not politically correct to write lines like a woman is only a woman, but a good cigar is a smoke. And of course, so nobody is familiar with Kipling, but Kipling's If is still great poetry. You know, if you can keep your mind all about you or losing theirs, just think of what good advice that would have been on Wall Street and a lot of other places recently. And treat the little fluctuations in fate. He said, treat those two imposters, success and failure, just the same. And in the end, he says, well, if whatever else happens, you'll be a man, my son. Good message. Good message. I mean, why not take these opportunities, the hardships and so forth, to make a man of yourself, or a person of yourself, to use the modern lingo. And so I know how you should cope with whatever the difficulties are of the present day. Just keep your head down and do your best. And do. Some of the people who had the best careers in my age cohort and the age cohort just before mine were the ones who had the worst clobbering in the 30s, because they were there when the great boom came. If you just kept plugging, why the favorable tide came in due course. Well, so much.